Keep looking once a month to see when they're giving us a new fire code. Have not seen any training. This is over service stations and dairy marts. It's above ground tanks. Now, that is kind of different because when you go to a service station, let's say you go down here to the Shell station. The tanks are underground. The pumps are above. As inspectors, we're responsible for the pumps. And we're responsible for the belly pan underneath the pump. We're responsible for whatever system they're monitoring with the pumps to make a printout to show how much they've lost, how much, or if they've gained any, if there's any water in the tank, when was their last load received. They should be able to print you out a little sheet. And I would staple that right with my inspection order. Because if that thing ever leaks, I'm going to tell you who's coming back out here to talk to us real quick, and that's going to be Buster's. Haven't you guys been doing this? And I just was at another fire station not too long ago, and they weren't even doing inspections on service stations. Yeah.
When we do our inspections, are we calling the state to come help us?
No.
No.
Why?
When we were in inspector school, that was something they said that a lot of places do. Above ground tanks, stuff like that, they call the state inspector to come help.
Above ground tanks? It's in your fire code.
I know it's in the fire code, but the state inspectors will come and help you do it, so you don't miss anything. I was just curious. They told us that in inspector school.
So what inspector comes and helps you? It's not a Buster inspector.
No, a fire and state
Oh,
fire
just a
inspector.
regular fire inspector? No. I didn't know they did that. Nobody well, I don't know if anybody in Franklin County does that.
They said a lot of the smaller departments that.
And maybe some of the smaller do work more with the inspectors, but we're supposed to be doing this because it's written right in our code book. And the only thing that Buster's doing is all the piping that's underground, well, when it's installed. That's Buster stuff, when it all gets installed. But once it's installed, the tanks, if they leak, that's part of theirs, you know. All the piping, and it's pressure piping. That's all theirs. Really, everything is still theirs, but ours is in the fire code that anything above ground is ours. And they look at it, if all you have to do is open a lid, then it's ours. If you have to dig for it, it's theirs. Does that make sense? Okay, good, because the other place didn't understand that. They were looking at me like, wow, what does that mean? Okay, I keep bringing this up because I really like this outfit. And the things that you need to look at here is these. That's where they're going to fill it at. Those are the little 5-gallon buckets that when the guy fills the tank, he puts his pipe up into there, and then he'll walk his pipe on up to drain the rest of the fluid out. And that's what that bucket's for. It's the same thing down in the ground. There's a bucket down in their ground, at least 5 gallons. And what they do down there is that when they unhook it from the truck, they drain it into the bucket that's there, and then there's a little valve you pull up on. And that lets it go down into the tank. It's just it's like a little thumb valve. It's got a little hook in it, just pull it up, and what fuel's left goes right back into that tank. That's so it doesn't go into the ground. Here's your pumps. These are your vent pipes. These are just different check places, probably where you can stick a tube in it to measure how much fuel's in the bottom of the tank. And you want to know which one to do that with, because a lot of these have an extra padding in the area, because people would go up, especially the ones when they were buried in the ground. What's the guy do when he lets go? He doesn't gently put it down in, he just lets go of it and goes bing. So they reinforce them right in the area where you stick your tanks. Nowadays we don't stick them very often. Now, what the guy down the street does, the one down here on Main Street, he still sticks them because he's got one of the few gravity-fed pumps.
BP show, pit stop.
Mike's. That's why he's still filling people's tanks, because he's not really in code, but they're letting him do it because he's grandfathered. If he ever probably has to dig those tanks up, they'll make him go to pressure.
So you gotta do that if he buys new pumps?
Oh, yeah, get new pumps, everything, if he has to go to tanks. And all he buys is used pumps.
Terry,
Yes,
how does an underground gravity fed tank work?
they actually put the pipe up higher and feed it toward the pump. Well, no, I take it back. It sucks it up from the gas pump and it feeds back into the tank, so when the gas pump shuts off, the gasoline drains right back into the tank.
Okay.
Where pressure piping, it stays in the pipe all
I see
the
what you're
time.
saying, okay.
That's the two differences.
So it's got
see-
a pump to pump it into the cars,
Yes, and that's in the pump itself, pump house,
above ground.
above ground, yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying now.
So it's just sucking it out,
That's
but
why
when
you
it
have to
stops,
pump on when you.
it lets it drain back in. And the problem with that is you can't measure if there's any holes in it.
Right.
That's the problem. Whereas a pressure tank, what they monitor is they monitor that pressure system. So let's just say it's 4 or 5 pounds pressure. I don't know what it is. But if there's 4 or 5 pounds pressure in that line, just a small percentage of that loss, and it will report it immediately. And I used to set mine up. There's 2 tests. There's one test that does it constantly, and then there's a test that does it once a month. I did it constantly. So anytime that that pump is not in use, it would start checking.
Okay.
And it doesn't start over, it just accumulates until it gets to 2 hours. But what that was constantly doing doesn't cost them anymore. So why not do the better test and always know if you got any leaks? These,
Is that Aberzeezy? That's one.
yeah, this is Aberzeezy, yeah. It's got the barricades, it's got a nice area here to hold this tank, and that is probably way bigger than what it needed to be, but it holds the tank real nice. So if this leaks, it's not gonna get into the groundwater back here, because there is a small little stream that sits right behind it. But this is a nice system just to look at and know that's what it should look like. And then there should be a shut off in the building for these two to shut these down so that people can't steal it. So let's move on, and since you've seen something that looks good, yeah. Backside of it, same thing. They got 2 dikes here. They have a dike for the tanks, then they have a secondary dike in case it would even get out of the first one. I mean, really nice system. It's one of the best I've ever seen. I don't know who did this for them or who made them do it. Did a really good job.
I did, several years ago.
Really? Okay.
My design.
Hey, if you win this, I'll take credit.
That's right. Right. No one knows. You're like, oh, I did it.
Was that before or after you lost your card?
Before, they just gave me an honorary card
Mm.
because I did such a good job.
Now, and you know, we don't have any control over farms, a true farm. How many farmers have above ground tanks? And they're all gravity fed, and that's not supposed to be.
A rot.
Well, Galbraith, they farm it. The only thing is, he doesn't farm it any longer. It's 2 different organizations coming, usually Greens and somebody else.
He's dead, isn't he?
No, not the boy.
Oh, okay.
And what I talked him into doing, well, and this was back before he got rid of most of his employees, that he had these skid tanks around to do for tractors and other things, whatever, and cutting the grass. And I got him to have somebody build him some steel tanks, which he did in West Jeff. Ramey's, I think, or somebody out in West Jeff that does it. And then he just set the tanks inside the steel structure. Well, now he's got no worry of any fuel getting into the ground. And that was the idea, because that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to clean up. He still has 4 tanks in the ground at the airport. There are 4 tanks that are for jet fuel.
So that airport's still used?
Oh, yeah.
It's mechanics. It's a mechanic now, right?
Yeah.
It's an airplane mechanic.
Yep, and he keeps his tanks up to date. His tank has a V-root system on it. We brought it all up to code. Now, he does have steel tanks though. So some days those are gonna come out, but they're lined. And they met the code at the time. Buster gave me hell for going to the state and getting it okay.
The new ones are polymers, right?
Yes, most everybody's put in some type of a polymer, type of tank, and a lot of those are all double walled. Now, they might just have air in them, and all they do there is they stick a probe down into the side, clear into the bottom, and if any moisture hits that probe, it goes off. The other ones,
Between the two.
yeah, between the two tanks, it's just like a little flat piece of wire goes down to the bottom with a sensor on the end of it.
So there should be nothing in there but air, right?
Exactly, on those. And then they have another one that they call brine filled, that a lot of times it'll look red or something blue color in there, and it goes around the tank, and then they measure at the top. Same difference. That if it hits this deal, or if it goes outside of this, in other words, it goes down, they'll have two different measurements there.
Kicking you square in the balls.
Right there,
What did I do?
that's an automatic shut-off. Now, you don't see those very often, but I know Sam's Club, and that's where this picture's taken, that's at Sam's Club. Because that's really for places that are self-service. Now, Sam's Club is somewhat self-service, the guy didn't come out and pump it for you, but there's supposed to be somebody in that little house all the time. I've been there, and there's not anybody in that house when I'm getting fuel. So, they do have a shut-off. And if you go to a place, and they have a shut-off like that, you know, do they check it? And I would ask them if I was you, if they've checked it lately, or had anybody, you know, when they check the tanks, or check the pumps, does somebody check to make sure that that button's still working? Because every once in a while, you'll find these things don't work, and you want it to work if that thing's on fire and they want to shut it down. Or a car fire happens. I mean, that can happen. They pull up, they're smoking, and all of a sudden it catches fire. Okay, emergency shut-off, maximum 100 feet to 20 feet. So you want it at least 20 feet from the island, and it can be up a maximum 100 feet. Nozzles must be at least 5 feet from the building opening. Shall be a qualified attendant, and a self-service at least one person qualified to watch the pumps. So if you think about Sam's Club, all you've been there, that's exactly what they're talking about. Oh, the things that I gave you today for handouts, you can keep those because that, anytime you go to a service station, all the numbers are there that you need to write them up for. So I made it to where it fits. Mounting of dispensers. Dispensers have to be mounted on the top of the pump island. And they have to be 6 inches off the ground. They have to be bolted to the pump island so that they don't spin. Because if they spin, it's going to tear that pipe off. And sometimes it'll spin and actually tear it down below if that is not secured good. So you don't want, we'll show you here in a few minutes. There's a place to where you're supposed to clip the shear valve off, but if they spin, sometimes it'll even spin that shear valve. And then you've got a fuel leak, you've got a massive leak. Okay, dikes, NFPA 30, designed to catch spills. And it should be 10% of whatever the container is. So if the container holds 1,000 gallons, then you would want 10% more of that, which would be 1,100, right? Gallons. I know, Scott, I'll figure it out later for you.
I don't remember.
And then, a lot of times in any dikes that I had built, I always put in a drain, which is, it can be nothing but a plastic pipe that goes into the deal, so when it fills up with water, if we're having the monsoons, that will fill up with water, and the only way it can get away a lot of times is, you gotta have a drain there. And then they just unscrew it, let the water out, and put the cap back on. Nobody, well, I can't say nobody, because some of those idiots might try to pour the gasoline out if they got a leak, rather than have it pumped. Okay, spill control. We talked about the 5-gallon buckets. They're both in the big tanks, underneath ground, and above ground. I showed you on the picture. Physical protection. Now, you know, at some of the pumps, islands, you'll see the concrete posts at both ends. That's the physical protection they're talking about, not the concrete pad. It's not part of your protection. Because if people come, now, there is no protection for somebody coming and hitting this sideways. You know, you see every once in a while on TV, somebody will come up over the curb and come at them. No, it'll still take the pump out. Secondary containment. all of them need secondary containment now. The only money that can get by without it is farmers, which we don't have much thing, but even a farmer, if you talk to him nice and he's got quite a bit going on, a lot of times they'll do it when you start talking about damaging their land. Everything has to be some type of listing used in with these tanks, whether they're above ground tanks or below ground tanks. It all has to have been checked out and make sure it does its function. There's an emergency breakaway. In fact, there's two on these below ground tanks. There's one for the pipe that you're filling your car with, and usually a lot of times it can be up toward the top or it can be right at the nozzle. So if the guy drives away with it, it should pop. The other one is the shear valve at the bottom of the pump. There's a shear valve that'll be tied to a steel bar, usually clamped. And if they hit the pump, that should knock it off, and that shear valve should shut. And if it does, then it's done its job. You've got only gasoline you're going to have is what's up into the pump. Method of storage of class 1, 2, 3 flammable liquids or combustible liquids at a motor fueling facility to which the public does not have access shall be stored in above ground tanks. So, you know, a lot of fire departments have these above ground tanks. You can have above ground tanks in somebody that's got a lot of equipment and they want a tank there. They can have it, but a lot of those need to be to where people can't get to them. So in other words, they're behind a fence. Now, fire departments, no. All they do is put the post in the ground. Most of the fire departments, though, put in a vault tank, which is covered with concrete. Motor fueling dispensing facilities to which the public has access, the only approved method of storage shall be underground. So there's the difference. If I limit who uses my stuff, then they have to be underground. Well, I take it back. They can be above ground if I limit access. So if they have a fence around it, they can do that. Otherwise, it has to be underground. Above ground tanks located outside above grade. Above ground tanks shall not be used for the storage of class 1, 2, 3 liquid fuels except as provided. Existing above ground tank installation, even as previously approved, that are determined to constitute a hazard by the fire code official, shall not be continued in service. The only way that I would ever get one knocked out is if it's leaking, because you're going to have a fight. The state, I noticed the other day out on the freeway, they're using trucks to carry the fuel to different areas and to the different equipment, which we don't regulate trucks. That comes under a different heading. And if it's on private property, you can't even make them stop it using the truck when it leaks. This new code should cover that. I bitched about it a little bit. Above ground tanks located in above ground vaults or below grade vaults. Above ground tanks used for storage of class 1, 2, 3 liquids. I don't need to read that to you. You just can't do it. Is that somebody else's phone or my phone? Mine. Chief, what's the name of that place that used to be in Franklin Township off of, what is it? Fetter, way up north in the northern corner. Used to be a bar right on the corner of the railroad tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Was that
San Margarita.
Yes, San Margarita. In San Margarita, right at the railroad tracks, there was like 3 or 4 above ground tanks, big tanks.
Probably Dallas's, Angelo's.
Yeah, and they would fill sometimes cars there, but most of the time it's 4 big trucks come in. And see, that's
I
not.
remember what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
like I said, I almost put money that those were Dallas's, but.
Yeah.
Was that part of Marble Cliff Oil?
Yes, I believe
Yes.
so.
That's
Yes.
what it,
But if you can picture, those are what
Yeah.
I'm talking about, some of these big deals. That's the only one I can think of, other than the big refineries. But they have 1,000,000-gallon
I think
tanks
that's what it
there.
was, it was part of that.
Lots. But that, think of that as being the above ground tank most of this is talking about. Overfill protection, that's at 5, and it's, overfill shall be provided. I showed you on the picture what they look like. That's where they're filling it. Overfill, there'll be a little, inside the tank. When they're filling it, there's nothing, it's pretty simple. A lot of them are just a arm that has a float on it. And when the gasoline hits that float, it causes it to go up and it closes it off. That's how it shuts down at 90%. They're not, none of them are filled to 100.
Until that doesn't work.
Until that doesn't work, yeah.
That's what they had
If
in
it
the city
breaks.
one day. The guy was filling up, was doing it, and that bitch didn't kick over, just pumped it right into the storm drain and everything.
Yeah, I had one of those happen at Certified
Yeah.
too on Broad Street one night.
That
Same as
that got
thing.
out of control quick.
And the guy that's pumping is supposed to stay with it. This was a cold day at our place. He was inside talking to the guy, the other one that runs Certified.
Yeah, that's how it was. He wasn't paying
Yeah.
attention. He was on the backside and he heard it and was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And there was something, they ended up, they said the city was at fault, whatever they forgot to check, but he pumped quite a bit all over the place. When the storm hit the ponds along Shire Rings there.
Makes it pretty.
Yes.
All those little rainbows.
Light that bitch off.
That will take care of it eventually.
Yeah.
It's actually easier when it's on fire.
Yep, I just leave it be.
There you go. Listed equipment. It's electrical equipment, dispensers, hose, nozzles, submersibles, submersible pumps, everything. Just don't, everything is, got some rating to it. Fixed pumps required, class 1, class 2 liquid shall be transferred from tanks by the means of a fixed pump design. So now we're getting back into this, you know, all your pumps are fixed. They're not to be out there. Tank openings, above ground tank shall be through the top only. And if you notice that first picture, there was, you can see it with the walls. There is nothing down here at the bottom. And if there is something, that's probably a gravity fed tank. And like I said, the only ones that have got those are the old ones. Now they're supposed to have pumps to them. The fill pipes, they still have to have some type of a catch basin. Okay, this is just a regular, in fact, this is at Haig and Sullivan. I was driving by one day. Here's your stops that we talked about. 6-inch platform, breakaway right up there. You can see it. Sometimes, like I said, it can be right here at the nozzle. And this is the panel you want to take off. And a lot of times, when I go in, if they've got 6 pumps, I'll do 3. I don't do all 6. I just, you know, I randomly just say, unlock that one, and this other one over here. Because that way I'm checking. And what you want to do when you do that, we'll get to a picture, and then we'll show you. There's my picture. All I'm looking for is leaks, but what I'm doing is, I want to look down in here, in the belly pan. What some guys will do is spin these suckers off, drop it down into that tank, and they don't pick it back up. There's supposed to be nothing down here. No liquid at all, and none of these filters. If there's liquid in the bottom, the pump has to be shut off. Till somebody comes and certifies this thing ain't leaking. And they gotta clean it out. So they take, like a bunch of our soap pads, throw in there, clean that back up. And if they're dumping this, you can see how much fuel could be in that silver. I've seen them down here at the one on Mike's, that they've changed that sucker and poured it just into the ground when I was standing there.
Seems reasonable.
I mean, it's natural, you got it from the ground to begin with.
While he's smoking a cigarette.
You know, I say, do you change it that way all the time? He said, oh yeah.
Nope, just-
And I looked over at the guy that's working on tanks and he's just doing this.
Ground, right?
That's why I look at it.
It's recycling.
I'm just
Sure.
recycling, I'm putting it back in.
Dinosaurs are going back in the ground with it all.
And just from some of your knowledge, everything has to be in conduit. The breakaway's right here. This is the breakaway. These are your filters, and when these start to get clogged, they go into a slow flow. So if you go to a filling station that you've been going to for a long time, and you know approximately how long it's taken, but now it's taking you twice as long, it's because this filter's dirty. And they need changing. These are the pumps. So I can tell that there's probably 2 grades in there at least, or maybe 1. But they got 2 different deals, so it looks like they got 2 different grades. Shear valve, and that is made to where where it's saying it's a surface point, it's made that this is actually weaker here. And here's your 2 valves that are going to shut. If they work properly, when this pulls apart, there's a clapper here that will shut and a clapper here that will shut. So hopefully we don't have as much fuel. I've had them, you know, pumps laying over sideways, and they didn't work because that shear valve was never tied to the platform. And it's just sitting there spilling out fuel. That's why we look. Because when you look in there, you also make sure that shear valve is clamped. And I don't mean loose, it should be clamped to where you can't spin a nut. And then look and make sure that the pump itself is bolted down to the concrete. Because so many times, these guys get in here and they don't put it back the way it is. These are the shear valves. These are the clamps. Sometimes there'll be one that goes away this way. This one's really nice because it has a separate one for each one. Now, most of them aren't this deep, these belly pans. A lot of times they're only about this deep. This is a pretty big belly pan. But they should all be, there shouldn't be anything in there. It's supposed to be clean. So when you look clean, you're done. Because if that pump's dripping at all, it'll be in the bottom, right? You don't have to worry about the other too much.
Is there any drains in that belly pan?
Nope. It's sealed. Now, even where the fuel comes in at the bottom through the piping, because it's got to come to get those valves that you see, those that have grommets around them, and that lets no water in. So this isn't going to fill up with groundwater, and it's not going to let what's coming out. And what we do is usually we put 5 gallons of water in those, or no, enough to make an inch or 2. After they run the pipes through, and we let it set for 24 hours. If nothing leaves, then they got to drain the water back out. But it's the way you test it. Spill containers. Right there's your, if you go in and they don't have spill containers, I can't imagine anybody doesn't have one except if they're putting in new tanks, that they just didn't do it, because most everything has been brought up to code. But there's the deal for it. Filling stations must do. Check for the 5-gallon fill tank, and that the release works so that the fuel will go back down in the tank. The breakaway connection you need check for. The pump protected. In other words, the concrete post at the end or some type of posts that keep you from hitting it. Over and short checks, inventory. That's the little sheet that get them to print out for you. And all they do is push a button. It isn't like they got to do some fancy thing. It's just push a button. They get a daily printout anyway. Supposed to.
So do you want their daily printout, or do you want to print out for like X
Whatever
amount
they
of time?
usually do daily is all I look at, because it'll tell me how much it's got. Now, you know, if it says on there that they've got a 300-gallon loss, that sounds like a lot. But most of my stations in Franklin County, I was getting 8,000 to 10,000 gallons every other day. Now you figure that over 30 days, and that's what this tank is, that's what this system is doing, is just doing it over, so that's not enough to be any loss. They're allowed a small percentage loss. Check leak detection. Shut off at registers. Most of these new stations, they have a red button on the cash register itself they can push. It isn't a separate button. But make sure they got one and let people know what it's for. I mean, most of these stations, do you really think they train their cashiers?
Really?
Yeah. Probably say, don't touch that red button, whatever you do. But that's what it's there for. They must have fire extinguishers for both the pump island and then for their business. So these are, we're going in, those are those codes. Dispensing emergency shut-off valves. That all has to be approved, there should be in there, if they have extra ones, ask them if they ever check them. You know, does anybody, when they come in and check the tanks, do they check those to make sure they work? I'm not going right over and do it. But I want to know that somebody has done it. And it's like any of these times, if somebody drives, and you can tell them, that, what happens if somebody leaves the pump handle in the truck and drives away, and now you've got a leak, how are you gonna shut that tank off? This can happen to anybody, especially if the women are driving. I know we don't have any
I was at a
women.
gas station and heard an awful racket. Some dude left it and had in his pickup, tried to drive away, rip that bitch out. I was like, drive.
Saw nothing, saw
Yep.
nothing at all.
This
Man,
is
it-
Washington Township.
It made a hell of a racket. It was about all
Yep.
70.
And when you,
It's even better when you see him driving down the road with a
Oh
big
my
gun.
gosh, man, I was like, what the fuck is that noise?
I got written in there, no filters in pan. Pump must be secured to the island. Look for your bolts when you're in there. Make sure the shear valves are done. And the no leaks, right there is your no leaks that you'd write up if you started seeing fluid or that filter. I'm gonna write that up real quick and you're gonna get that out of there. The attendant shall have shutoffs. The Shell station, let's go back to that one. When people are out at that pump, somebody's supposed to be turning around watching it. Have you ever been in there? Who's actually turning around looking at those tanks? Nobody. You've got to be able to see the tanks from where you're at. There's the pumps from where you're at. And if they don't, they have to have monitors. I've had, the Thorntons on West Broad Street, their cash register points toward the pumps so they can see that pretty easy. What they can't see is the diesel fuel. That has a camera on it. And a little TV underneath the register sits there, which I know they watch it so well. But yeah, that's so that they can see who's there and give them authorization to get fuel. And they still have to have some way to be able to talk to people. That's part of the code too. I think that comes in here pretty soon. Gravity and pressure dispensing. Flammable liquids shall not be dispensed by gravity from tanks, drums, barrels, or similar containers. I don't think it can get any more plain than that.
Hey Terry.
Yes.
On the bottom of the pump stations, if there's fluid in there, you say you write them up and they're to shut that pump down immediately. Then there had to have an outside inspector come in to certify and make sure that it's, make sure it's working properly or leaking or whatever, or is it a service contract? It's up to them to figure it out, right?
Right, almost all the stations have some type of a service contract with somebody to do their maintenance. They're the ones that will give you a paper saying they fixed it, or they will leave them a paper saying they repaired it.
You don't need to be present while.
No, we don't need to be present. All we want to do is be notified when it's fixed, just so that we know it's working now. But and they're all certified. They're usually, a lot of them have even went through the Buster program. But they have to be certified to work on the tanks, so they'll have a little card saying that they can do this, and then they repair it, and they can put it back in service, but they're doing it under their deal that they're allowed to do
Is
that.
there a time frame that they have to have this done by?
Nope, as long as you shut off, I don't care how long it takes them, as long as it doesn't take them over a year,
Because I'm just figuring.
but they're
some
losing money every
places-
day, so they get it fixed.
I'm figuring some places the right hand don't talk to the left hand.
Oh, yeah.
And they come out and say, well, why does it shut off and open it back up?
Oh.
Open that pump back up.
Well, then, see, that automatically makes them responsible, and the court doesn't like that kind of stuff. No. Now, then maybe I might call the Buster inspector out, let him deal with him, because his fines are so much bigger than mine. Yeah, I like that. My Buster inspector can do a lot more.
The code that didn't know it?
You guys got any questions on those handouts? That was the handout stuff. I think I got another,